I think that slowly everyone is starting to understand a little bit more what is happening. Here we have live examples of what actually can be built and applications that are being built. And I'm going to tell you a little story, actually, which I think is quite funny. Yesterday, we decided to make a speakers dinner, and initially we were foreseen to be 15, 16 people. And at the end, we end up being 35 people. And I heard from the guest speakers right now, I heard the word collaborating, networking, working together, create value for the end users and for clients. And I have an origin that my mother is Dutch, and sorry, Rutger. So it's funny because I have a Dutch mother, but I have a Dutch CEO, by the way, of course. But I have Dutch friends and I have Dutch clients, and it's actually very interesting to see how everyone is very commercially oriented, open-minded, and they always are looking for new things in a certain way, and they do it in a certain way, which everybody does it properly, obviously, but it's quite interesting to see how this was explained. And Rutger was very straightforward by saying that you can open up a wallet in a very fast way, and opening a bank account is getting very complicated. So at the end, also the question that we heard before, how can we do that this world actually improves and that the people get to know more about it? Well, I think at least today, one of the objectives that we had is to give additional information. We have blockchain experts, but at the same time, we also have people that have nothing to do with blockchain, or they have never done anything in that. And today, I guess that with the collaboration that we have at Bill with Scytale, the objective is to get the word out and that people can learn more, and that we do a sort of education process. Thank you. Now we move forward to the third panel, and here we talk about laws, identities, gamification, and Web3. So we have Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3. And we welcome Christoph Kampitsch. He is CEO of Scytale Ventures, with whom we are collaborating. And then we have Marco Bahn, who is coming. He's the CEO of GameDAO. Alessandro Palombo, CEO of JUR, and Ingo Ruebe, CEO of Kilt. And they will talk about very interesting thematics.
Thank you. It's not working yet. First, I want to apologize because when we chose to go to Lugano, Sasha didn't tell me how beautiful it is, and he also didn't say that the weather at the end of April could be as nice as now. So thank you for everyone being still in the room. Very much appreciated. I think it's not going to be easy. Second of all, I think the last panel was super interesting also for me. If you don't understand everything, no worries. I think not many people do, including myself. So not to worry. I'm in this space now for, I think, a little over a year. I worked in banking for more than 30 years. My 15-year-old son never cared what I do until I told him that I'm now investing in gaming. And all of a sudden, I became quite interesting as a person. So change of roles sometimes definitely helps. And with that, I would like maybe, Ingo, if you can start with a quick introduction, what Kilt is doing, and then Ale and Marco.
I will. So, yeah, hi, I'm Ingo Ruebe. I founded Kilt Protocol in 2018. I actually came from industry. I'm a computer scientist and worked in management positions for different industries. And with blockchain coming up, I thought, okay, I have to change my life, get out of industry and do something useful. Because it felt to me that there's a beautiful technology which can actually solve problems much better than the technology that we had so far. And when I decided that, I wanted to look at the most imminent problem that we could actually solve, and while solving it, it would also have the biggest impact probably, not only on people, but also on industry. And asking the question, what could that be? That would be identity, I think, because identity is something which is in the internet completely flawed right now, and where there is a huge need not only for people to regain the sovereignty over their digital identity, but also enable digital identity for industry at all, because right now it is not. And this is why we decided to build Kilt since 2018. Also in 2018, we decided to become a Polkadot parachain or Kusama parachain. We were one of the first projects actually to build on parity substrate, which is the underlying framework for Polkadot projects. We then in 2021 won one of the first Kusama parachain slots and are living happily on the Kusama parachain now. Since beginning of this year, we started to building useful application for end users and for industry on top of the Kilt blockchain, which keeps us busy.
Sorry, Ali, please.
Thanks, Christoph. Good evening, everyone. I'm very glad to be here with you today. My name is Alessandro Palombo. I'm the founder of JUR. And I think also in this conversation today, many times topics such as laws or complexity of opening a bank account or an LT emerged. I think that it's quite evident for every one of us that the digital world goes at a different speed compared to the regulatory or the offline jurisdictions, let's say. As you know, one of the maybe oldest problems or topics around crypto is this a kind of Wild West? Question mark. So there are kind of probably two extremes. One extreme is to leave the entire world of crypto completely unregulated, and the other extreme is to regulate heavily this space. So we are proposing a middle ground, and we are building the first actually digital native jurisdiction or digital native state. So this is something that you will read in the next few months also in the sense of network state. And actually our mission is creating the most efficient jurisdiction for digital economy. And we are very glad to be today for meeting all these projects along with us on Polkadot. Thanks to Mark Ashia, Christoph, Scytale to backing us after Team Draper and to bring us into this ecosystem that is very interesting. And
thank you. Marco, so you're my hero, why my son still finds me interesting.
Yeah, until he will hear my introduction, which is usually very bad. I started like 40 years ago programming, and apparently it was video games which I started in. Over the time I went into other disciplines like design and product building and so on. Accidentally landed in projects which are related to finance, so I'm not a native finance person. But one of the first projects I got in touch with was a naive idea of creating a marketplace for in-game items. It was run by a large exchange in Germany, and of course it failed because all these like well-known primitives, from enterprises possibly, applied to this project as well. But during that time, it was the time of DEFCON 0, so like the first moment, so to say, of Ethereum, and this got me hooked straight away into creating maybe more open primitives, open markets, which are accessible for everyone, and where people could, for example, liberate certain types of assets or build in this. So maybe more like really on a technical level. And after this project, I stumbled somehow in creating like a primary and a secondary market, which is something which might resonate with most of you. For me, the main takeaway there was, still not being like a native finance person, that regulatory compliance and such things, which for normies sound very boring, is kind of crucial and essential to build open worlds, which are maybe safer also, like for example, for your son. And afterwards, like gaining all this kind of unwanted knowledge, I reasoned really like what is it what I really want to build, and what came to my mind was like my childhood, where we started building games together and cloned basically popular games, and so we started thinking about how to merge all these topics, and one of the possibly initial problems every creator has is how am I going to survive building something I really love without working full-time, for example, and making money. So it's just like the simple problem of fundraising, and this led us actually to starting the idea of GameDAO as a community-based crowdfunding platform. But along the way, we found out that there are also other problems which need to be solved, especially facing a world, for example, what we just saw with metaverse theories or theses, that in the future we will have like environments which are actually giving home for a lot of people who are creative, and which will be able to create new products inside of this large-scale ecosystem. And if you compare this with the world we live in at the moment, where we have like largely centralized systems, we have like laws we can rely on, then a big question mark is also like, if you look into the transition we are in the moment in, with companies like Meta also trying to adopt, for example, something like the metaverse, then you see like, okay, there's like traditional commercial companies which are trying to create open worlds, which of course is like a failure by design. And then there's like cool projects like just what we saw, which are truly open. But if we imagine like all of us being in there, there's one fundamental problem, and this is kind of like coordination and governance. That's also something like which we talked about before. And therefore like we expanded kind of our primitives we are working on. So one part is fundraising, and the other part is governance for large-scale economies. So these two together basically enable community-driven innovation and enable people to build together with more safeguards, which are, for example, regulator-friendly. This is something which doesn't exist at the current point in time. So you have like builders who build larger organizations, for example, gaming guilds, which contain like hundreds of thousands of people, but there's no kind of way of transparency or compliance which they can be accountable of. And nobody cares about these things. So that's kind of sad, and that's possibly the reason why you guys came up with the idea to put the three of us together on one stage, because
no,
apparently
you were the three leftovers. So
I'm just making a good thing.
yeah,
out of it.
no, but I try to be honest.
Yeah.
No, so it's one other thing. I think I'm trying to. I think how many in the room do not know what a DAO is? Honest hands up. Yeah, you see. So it's a decentralized, autonomous organization. And the interesting thing about it is like all of us grew up in an environment where companies are formed as limited partnerships. Yeah. And they take that as given, yeah. Whereas, and Alessandro is a history specialist, so I'm just making the figures up. But the limited partnership is only, I think, like 250 years old, yeah. And people cannot get their minds around that. Maybe the way we collaborate will change a lot in the future as well. So that's why. A lot of it, like the people said before, that the media needs to be educated. We need to be educated, because what we're going to see is completely different than what we have seen in the last years. Yeah, but I want to go. I don't want to go too philosophical. We had this discussion today as well. So I go back to my son. He will. I apologize to him already. Yeah. So my son is playing in an NFT game. I think he's making more money than me now. Hopefully Mark is listening. So, and the thing is, so the way it works, you have like your little thing, and then you do something, then you can sell the stuff you collect. Yeah. So, and he has like more than one of these players, and then he said, "Hey, can I send this to my friend and he plays for me?" Yeah. And I said, no, the thing is worth like $10,000 on the market. If you do that, yeah, but he's a good friend. I said, how do you know him? Yeah, I said, yeah, I chat with him for a year now. And then I want to ask Ingo, so how can you solve it? Because even I know he's chatting with the guy for a year. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't even know where he lives. Hopefully he's not a pedophile. Yeah, that's the thing. But even that you don't know. Yeah, and the thing, that's why I think what Kilt is trying to create is so essential for the whole development. If you want to comment on that.
Yeah, so identity, so let's first talk a little bit about what actually identity is. I think we have 4 people here, so probably 5 opinions on what identity is. So for me, identity actually consists of 2 things, and you can imagine that very simple from the physical world. So in the physical world, you have a face, for example. You have a fingerprint, and you have something like a signature. These things are very personal to you, very private to you. Nobody gave them to you, right? You made them yourself. They're not issued by government or by a company or so. They are truly yours. And you cannot actually give them to someone else. And so this is what we call an identifier. This thing identifies you. If you see my face tomorrow somewhere, you say, oh, this is the guy with the identity, you can remember me. And so this is what identifiers are good for. And in the physical world, what we do is we adding credentials to these things. We take a picture of the face, put it on a piece of plastic, and have this piece of plastic issued by a government, which is a trusted entity, and then we call this thing a passport or something. And then I can have my passport in my wallet, and I can show it to someone, and then they can see, oh, the face matches, basically, oh, this is issued by the country of Germany, so this is obviously a German, and the German may go into Switzerland. So this is how identity basically works in the physical world. This is very frictionless. This is very fast. It is totally scalable, because somebody looking at my passport doesn't have to ask Germany if this thing is correct. It's just the credential which is verifiable, and it's totally private, because I can. It's my decision if I show my passport or not, right? So I am in the position of my credentials, which is totally valuable. And we had this all in the physical world, and then came the internet, like the Web 2, and it took it completely away. Now what we have is that there's some big American companies, and they control our digital identities. And this is what the Web 2 version is. And in the Web 3 version, we heard a lot about the wallets. Of course, you start with a wallet, but a good Web 3 wallet would not only contain your coins, it would also contain your credentials, obviously, and would also contain something like your face, or give you the ability to sign something. So this is what the difference between Web 2 and Web 3 is. And now, coming to your question, actually what your son wants to know is actually who this person is in the internet.
I think he doesn't want to know.
No, he doesn't really.
I would like to know before he
to
sends $10,000 worth of an NFT across the internet.
Yeah, so we could argue, wouldn't it be nice if people do a KYC check before going on a gaming platform?
Exactly.
I don't know if we really want that. This is a discussion which can be open. But what we do is basically we provide the technology to make this possible. So you could have some kind of KYC, which is like an internet KYC, just making sure that the person has proven this is my Twitter account, this is my email address, this is my phone number, maybe, so you can really circle back to the person and find out who that was. That is one possibility, which is more Web 3-like. Or you could also take a KYC provider and have the KYC provider issue a KYC credential after checking the address and everything of this person, and then make this a requirement for taking part in such a game.
Yeah, so I have a question for Ali now, based on that. Yeah, okay, let's say that is done, yeah? Okay, he sends it over, and then the guy sells it on, hopefully, Hugo's platform, yeah? And Scytale makes money out of it. And then, even if you know that, how do you foresee that there's, that there's law regarding that, or how do you envision it?
Yeah, I hope to answer properly, so that, you promised me that your son will be the next investor of JUR, so I hope I will be able to send you the documents.
Yeah, hopefully he will invest in myself, yeah, so
okay.
But I guess he will
maybe
spend all
both.
the money.
So these are, an interesting topic. So overall, I think that if you consider, the current legislative system, if you consider for example, the civil law countries, they rely on an infrastructure that actually, has a couple of hundreds ago, 200 years ago. So it was actually conceived for a different type of economy. So where the time and the speed and the distance also in the human civilization was having a different role. So, 100 years ago, it was a problem to travel maybe for 200 kilometers. And again, 100 years ago, the time of life was completely different. In a digital space, time and, again, space is completely different, right? So the real question probably is the current, state of the art of jurisdiction sufficient for solving this type of issues? So coming to your question, let's assume that, this is going to be a technical, but let's assume that your son sends an NFT to somebody else on the whichever system. Let's assume that something goes wrong. Let's even assume that there is an identity behind. Do you really see your son, or you in this case, unfortunately, to go before a local court? Do you really see to go before a local court and explain this complex case and start filling papers and whatever? So what we are doing is essentially a disinterconnection. So we are building a digital jurisdiction which offers a series of services. And for example, we are contributing to the ecosystem, trying to solve concrete problems in the governance and legal space. One of those is, for sure, dispute resolution. According to many authors, also for the internet, if you look at PayPal or eBay, dispute resolution has been one of the factors for allowing mainstream adoption. So if you don't have a trustable environment, it's quite difficult to, go in mainstream with new technologies. This is going to be probably the case also for Web3. However, when always I speak about dispute resolution, I don't know, there is something, not so funny about that, because you immediately imagine something adversarial where someone is against somebody else. So we expanded actually, and you will see this in a few weeks, also online in the new light paper, and in 2 weeks we are opening our citizenship program. We are expanding to a series of protocols. So I don't want to go too technical, but we are creating a composable system of protocols. Imagine that you can become a virtual citizen. You will be able to vote, first of all, on the constitution. So this constitution will actually regulate on a high level the overall architecture of the system. You can even elect some officials. They will stake tokens, so they will be partially liable. And we are trying to fix some problems. Let me give you a few examples that maybe they are concrete, okay? Maybe, probably all of you know that, but nobody often spend time thinking about that. We all, as citizens, we are liable with 100% of our assets normally. So you can, for sure, maybe create a trust and segregate your assets, or you can create an LTD. But in principle, you are liable with 100% of your assets. And if you think for a second about that, it's strange, why you can spend 10K or even 100 euro in, an open online in UK, an LTD, but at the same time you're liable with 100% of your assets. So imagine that one of the services we will offer is to create with one click, with your wallet, a limited liability identity. You can put a bond, for example, for 10,000 USDT, and create even a pseudonymous identity through which do business in this virtual jurisdiction in a much more efficient way, where space costs are much less, cumbersome. So this is one of the directions we are working on. Another direction is, and sorry to insist on this point, but I think this is pretty interesting because it's the first time that you have a kind of self-sovereign identity, and which actually allow you to set your liability cap. And when you operate, for example, in an open environment, the counterparty can look, Christoph, for example, in this case, in your wallet and say, okay, in case something bad happens, you are liable, but until a certain, let's say, cap that you design for yourself. Laws, so how do we interpret laws in a modern environment? So do we really imagine that your son at your age, at his age, even if, again, he's going to be one of the largest LP in Scytale for sure in a couple of years, but in any case, do you imagine really reading hundreds of pages of T&Cs? No. So what we are creating essentially is, for the lawyers in the room, so probably you heard of the concept of merchant law or lex mercatoria. It's a phenomenon that became quite widely spread in the 70s of the last century. Essentially, international contracts between large corporations, they have arbitration clauses. The arbitration clauses, as you know, have a specific regime in 168 substantial laws and offline jurisdictions. So we are leveraging that system for creating a small autonomous legal system for governing private relationships. So this is what we are bringing into this ecosystem with a willingness to create a more efficient, system. And this is version 1, actually. And for example, with Marco, we will sit down and cooperate for a working group where, in this case, we will create together some universal standard contracts, for example, for terms of sales for NFTs. Does it make sense to have every project recreating, reinventing the wheel for disciplining even the, the terms and conditions or constitution for the metaverse? Does it make sense every time to renegotiate that? We think not always. Of course, in case the contracts are managing high value contracts or where the contract similarity is very diverse, you need still customization. But in many cases, I think it's like the safe for Y Combinator. For anyone in tech in the room will be pretty clear. The value of a standard, for example, in that case adopted by Y Combinator, is that we don't need to sit down and renegotiate from the scratch. Rather, we rely on a previously done negotiation between two opponent interests, and this is what we are going to do in massive scale. So this will be the legislative of JUR. I'm going to maybe give you back the word, and I hope really that I can send it.
Yeah, one thing you could see is that the founders we have in the portfolio are fairly passionate about their project. Yeah, so I think that's quite important for us. That it's not always easy for me to follow everything, but I want to have the last question for Marco. So why? What is interesting for me is like, gaming is something where people say, yeah, you have a bunch of guys who play for 10 hours, but and do nothing else. But what is very interesting, first of all, the sheer size of the industry, and the thing is, why do you think so many cutting-edge things came out of that space?
At the end of the day, this is like more than 4 decades of the development, with very simple games like Pong in the beginning, and over the time, like games which became more and more complex in many ways. Like, for example, storytelling, there were more opportunities because we had more storage, or, for example, graphics programming, always people stretching the capabilities of machines, and therefore the industry which developed out of that, the graphics card industry, also got like a huge growth factor, of course, because of that, because people wanted to create better games with more realistic graphics, and on the other end, people had to supply something which can do this. And yeah, at the end, like now we're in this market, like 165 billion of revenue, just like 1 year ago, created out of 3 billion players. That's pretty enormous. And the interesting thing there is that all of this revenue and creations are based on centralized systems. Yeah, so basically the world most of us still live in. And with Web3, it's the first time that we can really create something which empowers people to be an active part, for example, in the creation of video games, or in our case, in the ownership or in the governance of video games. So this wasn't possible before, and therefore, like, if you imagine this huge market, the transformation potential we are looking at, it's just gigantic. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm not going to open the floor for questions because we don't have time. We're doing Italian style overrunning for 30 minutes already, I think. I think we're going to have a short break now. Thank you, guys. For me, I know that for me it's super interesting. Hopefully, please follow up with anyone. I think everyone is staying here for afterwards, and we convene in like 10 minutes or so if this is possible. Thank you.